This episode of On the Beat is brought to you by Ingles. Shop online with Ingles Curbside Pickup. New curbside stores opening every week. Please welcome Mike Griffith.
Oh, hey everybody, Mike Griffith here. Welcome to tonight's edition of Ingles on the Beat. Really excited about tonight's show. We're going to have Cole Cubelic from the SEC Network join us very shortly. And of course, Jeremy Pruitt. Second half of the show, we're going to talk a lot about what's going on with Georgia football, the timing of all this. It's crazy, isn't it? We got early signing day coming up on Wednesday. I know the dogs have been practicing. We're going to have a chance to talk with Kirby Smart and some of his players tomorrow. Looking forward to that. Haven't seen those guys since, December 3rd, I guess, right? And Kirby is going to talk about the preparation that's gone in for the Ohio State, December 31st, 8 p.m., Mercedes-Benz Stadium, Georgia, a 7-point favorite. And then, of course, potential transfers. Smoke Bowie, a guy that was visiting this weekend, and you saw the pictures on Instagram of the Texas A&M DB. Might he transfer back to Georgia? We know Keely Ringo likely moving on, projected first-round pick. We've seen a lot of these projections. Jalen Carter, universally regarded as a top 5 pick. Mel Kiper Jr. has him number 1. Todd McShay, of course, recently coming out saying, hey, not so sure about this guy's personality. I don't put much weight in that. There's nothing documented. We don't have any strong feelings about that at Dog Nation from what we've heard from the team and Kirby Smart, but it is typical for NFL personnel types to try to kick the tires, find whatever they can on players to criticize: size, height, weight, speed, personality, a medical injury. We saw it happen with the Kobe Dean. Sometimes it holds water, sometimes it doesn't. But this is how the NFL personnel game is played for the draft. I know it's upset a few Dog fans. Wouldn't worry about that. I think that what Jalen Carter's done on the field, playing the second half of the season, absolutely speaks volumes. So really looking forward. We'll have Cole in just a minute. Want to cover a little bit more ground with you. I don't know if you saw the news from the weekend. Kirk Herbstreit commenting on Kirby Smart, saying he relates better to college players than anybody else, any other coach in college football. Laura Rutledge, behind the scenes, says Kirby's message to the team on Selection Sunday was, hey, you've got to be able to find your motivation. Some news: Bill Norton, defensive tackle, the only Georgia transfer to date. He's landed at Arizona. It's a good situation for him. Not in the Georgia rotation. This is a healthy transfer. Sometimes you see guys, maybe take deals, NIL deals, take a half a step forward. But I think this is a case where it really did work out, and a guy's going to have an opportunity to play somewhere else. You might have saw the news. The Joe Moore Award came out. This is a really coveted award. Georgia's been trying to win this for years and years and years. They've been finalists. They've come close. Last year, they were runner-up to Michigan. This year, runner-up again. The vote was closer than ever. And I know a lot of Georgia fans were confused. Hey, wait a minute. Georgia's undefeated. Didn't Georgia beat Michigan last year? I said, you know what? Let me get my buddy Cole Cubelic on air to join me. Cole is with us now. Cole is the chairman for the voting committee. And Cole's a former offensive lineman himself. I know you guys are familiar with Cole. You've seen him on doing a lot of the sideline work with the SEC Network, kind of a guru in the trenches. Cole, thanks so much for joining me tonight.
Yeah, good to be with you, Mike. Always enjoy hanging out, man. Hope everything's going well.
It's going great, Cole. And obviously you guys have created something there with the Joe Moore Award, that very coveted award. And this year, I don't want to call it controversy because I look at it like there's a lot of really good offensive lines out there. But Georgia kind of getting to that point, you and I talked about it earlier, they're kind of winning everything. They're winning national titles. They're seeing guys winning awards. And there's kind of this feeling of, well, gosh, why didn't they win this one? So I'll let you share a little bit about the Joe Moore Award, how it's determined, who votes on it, and what the process is.
We have a committee that is basically in charge of watching the film, scouting out the teams, making decisions on who's going to be a semifinalist, who's going to be a finalist, and then we have over 150 voters, all but I believe 3 this year that either coached or played the position. That would be a couple of guys from an analytics standpoint and one from an NFL scouting standpoint whose dad was an NFL coach for over 30 years, coaching the offensive line. So we feel pretty confident that the people that vote for this award, we're not just giving it out to any random members of the media. Sorry, Mike, you're not included on this vote. I apologize for that. We're not trying to take the Heisman route of just, we want people to put it in their Twitter bio and, tell people that they have this vote so we can try to make a little bit more noise with it. But this was the first year that we had ever only had 2 finalists, and first year that we had a back-to-back winner, and that was Michigan. The vote, as you stated before, was extremely close. As I said, over 150 voters, and it was just a 5-vote difference. It's one of the closest votes we've ever had. And the way that I looked at it this year is really and truly like just choosing between your favorite flavor of ice cream. Like if you're a chunky kid like me growing up, some people like the flavor of ice cream that was super technical, super fundamental, understanding footwork, hat placement, hand placement, assignment football, working together, shoulder to shoulder, staying square, working up a combination block to the second level. Whereas other people, kind of like me, may enjoy the gladiator style of football just a little bit more. They want to see people be bludgeoned. And it's something that I have, not that I don't appreciate technique and fundamentals, but for me, that's just what I enjoy watching a little bit more. That's where I think Georgia really excelled. Guys 15, 20, 30 yards down the field, tracking the football, finishing blocks. Guys on screen plays, taking corners and linebackers, escorting them to the bench area 5 yards out of bounds, punishing people to the ground, finishing plays. That's what I enjoy watching. I think Georgia embodied that a little bit more than Michigan did this year, but collectively from start to finish, consistently, the majority of the people who voted for our award decided that Michigan was the better offensive line from start to finish. I don't think that there would have been any issue with either group winning. It's not to take anything away from Michigan. I thought Georgia had a hell of a year, but like I said, that's the direction that the majority of the people that vote for this award wanted to go. And 95% of those people, if not more, played the position and coached the position. So, it's just, like I said, one of those deals where some people like it one way, some people like it the other way. That's the way that the vote went.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm sure there's going to be some disappointed Bulldogs players. That was one of their goals. On the other hand, Kirby Smart probably says, you know what? It was pretty good motivation last year when they played Michigan. And, the fact that Georgia's defensive line kind of wrecked last year's Joe Moore Award winner, look, that line had 3 first-round draft picks. I don't know how the Georgia offensive line would have held up. So I don't necessarily think that that's a determining factor. I do think this, though, Cole. I think that Michigan's win over Ohio State probably put Michigan over the top. The way they were able to dominate that game, they averaged more than 7 yards per carry. And when I was looking on the Joe Moore Award site and reading some quotes from some of the voters, Jimbo Covert, former teammate of Jim Harbaugh, they pointed out, hey, the way they played that game against Ohio State and dominated in the trenches, that's what got me to vote for you. And I just thought to myself, boy, Georgia wasn't playing that last weekend. It kind of reminds me a little bit of the recency bias maybe that we saw with the Heisman Trophy. Everybody kind of watching that last weekend and what an advantage that is. And I guess that's just the nature of it. And one thing I would ask you, and I wonder this about the Heisman too, do you think we'll get to a point in time where we vote on these awards after the season is concluded? Or do you think we lose a little something? Do we lose a little bit of the audience if we wait until after the final game? And whereas this way, we're still talking about it as we lead up until the playoffs.
No, I think it's a fair question. And I do think that either from an award standpoint, you lose a lot of momentum once the season's just concluded. And I also think, one thing you have to consider is, if you wanted to go present that award and you wanted everybody to be there, and we actually had to do this in the COVID year when Alabama won it, we had to go in the spring and deliver the trophy, and not all the players were able to be there. And that's not what we want as a committee. We want to be able to give this to the entire group, let them share it together, let them obviously see the trophy presentation as a group, because it's the only award in college football that goes to an entire position group, not just an individual player. So I do think it would take away from it from that standpoint. You got guys that are going to the NFL draft, going to prepare for the draft, guys that are transferring, going to the places. They might not all be able to be a part of it. So not only do I think you lose some momentum from a publicity standpoint or a notoriety standpoint, but you also lose the ability to have all those players right there together to be able to celebrate in winning it.
Now, one of the things you do, and I know you have a vote as well, you study all the teams. I know you've been a fan of Cedric Van Pran. He's a guy's name you mentioned. And although it's the line, you saw a little bit of Darnell Washington. Can you share a little bit about those two guys, what you see on tape as you watch those guys in the trenches specifically, whereas most of us are just kind of following the ball?
Yeah. Well, I think with Cedric, first and foremost, having played that position, there's things, and this is where we get a little bit discombobulated sometimes with, grades and ratings, and that group was a 97.8 in pass protection. I don't know what in the hell that means, because the people who are grading that, they don't know the assignments. They have no idea what was called by the quarterback. They have no idea who is identified as the Mike linebacker, what the front was called. All those things can determine if you're going to go one way or the other, or if you're going to go double team to a certain guy. Are you working to 56 or are you working to 49? We don't know that. So to say you can definitively tell me what a grade is for an offensive line, it's virtually impossible. It's technically impossible for any group. Now, if you want to go grade effort, absolutely, we can go do that. If you want to grade how they're managing the block that they're on, like if I'm trying to block you right now one-on-one, we can grade how that took place, of course. But to sit there and grade assignments over the course of a game, you can't do that for any position. Think about center with everything that you have to identify the point linebacker, you identify the front, you're making calls of who's working together, who you're working to, and then you're going to make different checks as far as plays are concerned. How do you grade that? How do you grade what a quarterback does in a game? You have no idea what he's coming up and identifying, what he's getting to, what he's getting out of, what coverage he's seeing and reading. It's a safety. To tell me you have a halftime grade of a safety, Mike, that's not possible. With everything that a safety or a Mike linebacker has to do in a game, you can't come and tell me that you know their grades at halftime just because you watched it on TV. It's not real. Now, we can utilize that for a certain extent, and it can help us project certain things and understand certain things, but it can't be the end-all, be-all. But one thing that I see with Cedric, having played the position and having an understanding of what goes on, there's a lot of communication that he is handling at the line of scrimmage. And to me, it's blatantly obvious that he is the glue that keeps that group together, because when he gets to the football and approaches the football, he's directing things. He's talking to both guards. He is the guy that is allowing the traffic to be able to flow the way it does. And then obviously he plays good football. I think he understands leverage a little bit better than he did a season ago. He's a little bit more flat back, keeps his pads level, understands how to stay square. He gets a little bit, it feels like he has a little more power this year as well than he did last season. But he's a young man that at that center position, you don't often get a lot of oomph, a lot of push. It's sometimes considered to be more of a finesse position, but not with Cedric. He's got a legit power when he comes off the football. And when he works those double teams, a lot of times they're getting movement. And then he's pretty fierce in pass protection as well. So I love the mental aspect of what I see. Once again, I don't know how often he's right and wrong, but I don't think he'd still be playing if he was wrong very often, because I don't think Kirby or Stacy are going to go for that. And I had a conversation with Stacy about him multiple times this year. We had the Missouri game, and he was very complimentary about, just how much he handles his football IQ. He wants to be the guy that manages everything at the line of scrimmage. There's not a lot of players, Mike, that welcome that. There's not a lot of guys that say, no, I want the responsibility. I want to designate what the front is. I want to designate who the point linebacker is. And even sometimes if you get super advanced, you see things in coverage, I want to be the guy that determines we need to get out of this protection because this safety's playing off on the boundary, or we need to move here. We've got a running back staying in. We don't have to slide this protection here. And I think he's a young man that accepts all that, and he's flourished with all of it this year.
And what about Darnell Washington? I know he's a tight end, but you were able to see him do his dirty work in the interior line. I mean, how does he look, and how does he work in there? How effective is he as a blocker?
Well, it's funny because I was talking to Stacy Searles before that Missouri game, and the last time I saw him in person, I think, was a spring game before the year they won the national championship. Tom and Jordan and I had that game, and he was actually the first person that I brought up to Kirby because it was coming off of his freshman year. I said, Coach, this kid is willing to be a blocker in line, like they lined up next to the tackle. And he's like, no, Cole, he doesn't mind it. He wants to be good at it. He gives great effort. He tries. Whereas, but you see it, Mike, a lot of tight ends in today's college football, they're just overgrown receivers, and they act that way. They want to flex out. They want to catch fades. They don't want to block anybody. They barely try to get in the way. But as a freshman, which is where you really don't see a lot of it. I mean, he'd get his face mask right down the middle of a defender. He'd be driving his feet. And I'm like, okay, this guy can go. And I was like, Coach, is he really 270? And he just kind of stopped and stepped back. And Kirby said, Cole, he's 285. And I was like, you've got to be. There's no way. But, and the crazy, so I'm talking to Stacy before that Missouri game. And I said, Coach, honestly, if I gave you him for 6 months, how much money could you make him as an offensive tackle? And he just laughed. He said, I think I could make him the richest tackle to ever play the game. He's just so athletic. And it's crazy. The first thing Jordan said when he came down on the field before that game, he's like, God, I forgot how big Darnell Washington really is in person because he didn't have pads on yet. But Mike, he has tackle shoulders. He really does. Like his upper body, he is in a tackle frame, but then he has like an inside linebacker waist, and then he has a tackle rear end and like guard quads, but then he has like defensive end ankles. It's like he is. I haven't seen many people put together like Darnell Washington ever. I call him like a Vince McMahon first round draft pick. Like he could go be a pro wrestler tomorrow and probably make a ton of money doing it because God doesn't make many humans like that. And I think if he decided to and put on 15 pounds, he might be the most athletic tackle we've seen in decades. But then you see him high pointing the football and jumping over DBs and catching the ball in traffic. And you're like, no, stay at tight end. But what's with the fun thing with Darnell is what you struggle a lot with at tackle is the athleticism that you deal with one-on-one. And because he's such a great athlete, when he pulls or they run screens and he gets out in space, he's able to manage them. A lot of us offensive linemen get out there and we fall down or we run past people because we can't slow down. You can't redirect. He doesn't have issues with that. That's why he's gotten so many massive blocks in the screen game this year, is because he's athletic enough to control his body and break down or change direction or be able to have a good feel where somebody's going and be able to get that contact. He is an extra offensive lineman in a lot of ways, but it doesn't take away from the type of actual tight end or receiver that he can also be.
Yeah, it's funny. It's like if you were trying to put somebody together on a video game, it would be Darnell Washington. He kind of checks all the boxes in terms of all those attributes. And Kirby has talked a lot about that. When Tim Tebow was talking about Brock Bowers taking a screen, most tight ends, he said, will take a screen 8 yards, whereas Brock can take it 80. Part of that formula has been Darnell Washington, as well as the receivers blocking in the open field. And Kirby always tells the media that, and we kind of go, okay, Kirby, we get it. But it really is kind of a difference maker for Georgia. Now, in line of the Joe Moore Award, you looked at all the lines. So I kind of want you to give me a crib notes version of what we're going to see from Ohio State. I know they've got a projected first-round offensive tackle. Just how good can the Buckeyes be? I guess I've heard that maybe the place to attack them is up the middle, but you would know that better than anybody.
Yeah, I this is a group, Mike, that I haven't been overly impressed with this year. Just to be honest with you, I don't have another way really of saying it. I know they've had a lot of hype. I know there are a lot of people that have been high on them. Their tackles are massive. I mean, when we talk about just giant human beings, like we've been talking about with some of the Georgia players, be it Amarius Mims or be it Jalen Carter or be it Darnell Washington, like these tackles that Georgia's going to see, they're in that category. Now, they're not quite put together as nicely as some of those players for Georgia that we mentioned, but they are massive humans. So what they do give you is a difficulty to just get around the hump or get around the edge because of their size that they bring. I don't think it's an overly athletic group. I don't think it's overly of a physical group. Now, if you go back 3-5 years ago, there were some Ohio State lines that would get after your ass. And I mean, they brought some nasty, they brought some fight, they brought some mean. I haven't seen that. The most they have as far as that kind of an individual is caged over their tight end, which if you like Brock and you like Darnell, watch number 9 for Ohio State. That dude is fun to watch. Like he is a filthy football player in a very positive way. But I just don't think the makeup of their offensive line really is that. And if Georgia can find a legitimate edge presence, I do think they can affect the pocket that way. I think it's going to have to be mostly speed, because if you can get a guy that can get a little bit of a jump on the snap count and can dip and rip and can stay flexible and bend, and Georgia has some younger guys that can do that, then I think you're going to have a chance affecting the quarterback and affecting the pocket. The difference inside is, and I don't think they're as capable physically inside, but the problem there is this is not an Ohio State offense that lives over the middle of the field. There have been certain offenses over the last few years where quarterback relies a lot on stepping up in the pocket and delivering the ball, and they attack the middle of the field. Like you think about that 2019 LSU offense. I mean, Joe Burrow would step up, boom, attack the middle of the field. To me, Ohio State attacks the perimeter a lot more. And so if you dent the pocket, I don't think it's quite as effective because Stroud doesn't want to run. So he's not looking to get out of the pocket. And so I think he stays deeper in the pocket more times than not. So if Georgia can find an edge presence, that's how I think they can affect the pocket a little bit more. But I don't look at this group and say, oh, I think they'll just handle, the Georgia defensive front or the Georgia front seven. I I don't really see that at all. I've had people call into my show in Birmingham and try to tell Greg and I that this Ohio State team is going to run right at them, that the running backs are going to be healthy and they're going to go north and south. And I don't see that. And honestly, after the SEC championship game, I think I would probably take the mantra in of throwing the ball as much as I could, because I don't think the run game is going to be there for Ohio State, regardless of how talented they are at tailback. So I think Georgia has, and here's the other part is when you're as big as some of those Ohio State offensive linemen are, you're not very good laterally. And so with the way that Georgia runs and operates their pressures, and this is not really new to this year, this has been happening under Kirby for a while. Georgia is the most precision-based pressure team that I have studied this year. And when I say that, what I mean is when you have a defensive tackle and a linebacker, and the D tackle is going to go in and the linebacker is going to loop around, that linebacker will have enough patience and he will hug that butt cheek of that defensive tackle until the very last second, and then he'll pop out and he'll get north and south, as opposed to where some guys are just, that D tackle slant too fast, and then it's just you're kind of out wide. You have to redirect back in. You don't get that from this Georgia front seven. I mean, it is precision pressure in every way possible. The pride that the defensive linemen or linebackers take in being the penetrator, the first one through, essentially you're attacking one offensive lineman, and you're probably not going to get to the quarterback on that play. Your job is to knock the center off his track so he can't switch up on a twist. This group takes a lot of pride in that. And there's not a lot of groups out there that do that. A lot of guys, the other teams, they'll penetrate, but then they still want to kind of get back in and go attack the quarterback. Not this group. They are on a mission to make that first guy pay the price for even being there, knowing it's going to create the space for the loop man. I mean, it's team football is what it is. And you have to have buy-in to do that. You don't just tell your guys, okay, it's going to work if we do this. The players have to believe, all right, I'll sacrifice myself on this play because I know the other guy's going to be able to get there and get home, and it'll be better for all of us. I don't know if laterally this Ohio State offensive line is athletic enough to continuously be able to stop that, which means they'll probably go more slide protection, more gap protection. Well, Kirby's got slide busters that they can run also, and Glenn Schumann has put those in. I've seen them operate those at times. And then, two, that's going to limit the amount of time you have in the pocket because that's quick protection. So C.J. Stroud's going to have to get the ball out. That gives you some advantages in coverage. You want to play a little bit tighter. The ball's coming out faster. You're not going to have to worry about double moves and things going up over the top. So that's kind of how I see this one going for the Georgia defense. Are they talented at receiver? Yes. Is there a lot of arm talent in that quarterback? Absolutely. But I think they'll have to be one-dimensional. And when you give Glenn Schumann and Kirby Smart this much time to prepare against a one-dimensional football team, you have some real advantages.
Yeah, really asking for trouble. And Jordan Davies used to say, 2 on me, somebody's free, to your point about the level of buy-in. Last question for you, Cole. In studying all these offensive lines, specifically in the SEC, maybe you saw some Oregon. How disruptive is Jalen Carter? You've seen some great pass rushers, some great defensive linemen over the last 10 years or so. Where does Jalen Carter stack up with some of the better defensive linemen you've seen?
When he hits that switch, Mike, he's as good as anybody I've seen. And, the difference is, once again, the physical makeup to just be as big and stout as he is and to have the lateral quickness. When he gets a one-way go, like you saw him win across the face in that short yardage situation in the SEC championship game, like you're not going to cut him off when he's got a one-way go and he's just going. But then when he two-gaps you, and so he strikes and sheds, I mean, he is in full control of that offensive lineman if he gets his hands on him. So other defensive linemen have some of those things or two of those things. You don't usually have the mass, the quickness, the power, and the technique and fundamentals and how to use your hands. I mean, some of the swim moves that I've seen him give centers and guards this year, he looks like a 260-pounder doing that kind of stuff. So, I go back to, when I was in school, I played Stroud and Seymour. I played Gerard Warren, who was the number 3 overall pick at Florida. And so I got a pretty good level of guys who I comp as far as being that big, being able to move that way. And when he's on, he's absolutely in that category as one of the most dominant, disruptive defensive linemen that I have seen.
Wow. Fascinating stuff, Cole. Great stuff. Well, Cole, you got your daily show with Greg McElroy and WJOX. Always appreciate when I have an opportunity to go on your show. Certainly appreciate your work on the SEC Network as well. Thank you for joining me. I'm going to take my halftime break. When I come back, Jeremy Pruitt is going to join. We had a former Auburn player in Cole who speaks SEC language and knows it all.
Hey, I'll tell you this real quick, Mike. I'll tell you this. I was asked this on an interview today. Favorite coach that we get to meet with in our TV meetings? Jeremy Pruitt, all-time number one. All-time.
All-time number one.
You talk about pure, unadulterated honesty with some humor and some dry wit, and then you throw in that accent in there, and I mean, it's game over. Every meeting we used to sit down with him, and he would say, "Man, y'all really just get paid to watch film? And that's all y'all do? That's it?" And I would trade jobs with y'all today. I'm like, well, Jeremy, if you knew how much money we made, you wouldn't trade with us. Like, I would take your salary today. He's great. I love Jeremy, the best, and knows ball as well. Like, once we started diving into football, I mean, he can sit there and break it down as well as anybody. So tell him I said hello. We miss meeting with him because he is one of the most entertaining, most enjoyable meetings of any head coach we would ever have.
I'll pass that on. I'm sure Jeremy will appreciate that. We're going to take our break, give our sponsor, Ingles, some recognition and credit. Appreciate Ingles. When we come back, Jeremy Pruitt will join the program.
That Ingles sells more organics than any other store, or that they run their own dairy, or that they only serve USDA choice and prime meat? Did you know that they have more local craft beer than any place else, or that they have Energy Smart stores, or that they professionally slice and package imported cheese from Europe? Did you know about their giant international aisle, local farm partnerships, curbside pickup, wine department, or that they donate 3,956 meals a day to local food banks? Well, now you do. It's all in the bag. Ingles, low prices, love the savings.
Well, Jeremy, welcome to the program. I don't know if you got to hear Cole do his impression of you. Was that a good impression? You think he got the accent down?
Hey, I didn't even hear it. I've been trying to put together toys, so I didn't get to hear any of it.
Well, he told us just a few moments ago, he said that you were the all-time favorite coach interview for the SEC Network staff because of your sense of humor, knowledge of football, and your wonderment that they were paid to watch football, how much you appreciated that these guys actually got paid to watch film. So Cole's a guy, I think you missed playing against him by a few years. I think he was at Auburn right around the time you were finishing up your career at Alabama. He followed you. But it was interesting because he said he appreciated your honesty and your football IQ. And, I guess I would just start out by asking you, this Joe Moore Award that Cole and this group have created, I think this is the only team award that we've seen. And I'm sure when you were at Tennessee, you were aware of it. What about this award? What's the value of having a team award like that instead of an individual award?
Well, I think it first of all, the offensive linemen, right? They hardly ever get recognized. They only get recognized if they give up sacks, they give up negative plays, and usually these guys are kind of your heart and soul of your football team. You talk about leadership and toughness. For some reason, my whole life, I've kind of gravitated to the O-line. I don't know if it's because I look like them, I'm built like them. I don't understand why, but they kind of set the tempo for the team, in a lot of ways. So it's kind of one of those deals. When you remember when we grew up on the playground, right? There was a few people that you knew stay away from them, right? You could push your limit so far, but make sure you don't go too far, right? That's kind of the way the old linemen are. They're usually kind of soft-spoken, but when they speak, everybody listens.
Yeah, it can get kind of nasty. One of the guys you used to work for, Coach Fulmer, looked kind of vanilla on the outside, but I'd see him get heated up every now and then at those Tennessee practices. Well, Jeremy, the bowl season started, and I watched the Florida-Oregon State game. Just out of curiosity, and listen, I understand that Anthony Richardson wasn't out there, and their leading tackler, Ventrell Miller, was missing as well, and Justin Shorter, the number 2. But you're still thinking, hey, this is an SEC team. This is a SEC team that beat the Pac-12 champs, Utah, very beginning of the year, although you told me you thought if they played that game 10 times, Utah would win 7 or 8 of them. And Oregon State just put it on them, and I guess I would ask you, you've been in the huddle as a coach, as a player. What were we watching there? Was that just one team that wanted to be there more than the other?
Well, I think Oregon State's a much better team than Florida at this point in the season. It's a little bit alarming to me for Florida and how much they regressed as the season went. It probably shows the amount or lack of depth that they have within the program. They obviously, hey, it's hard to have a good quarterback, right? It's hard to find one. Look at the NFL. It's hard to find one guy, but they had a guy that could produce with his feet, probably more so than his arm, but he does have some arm talent. But when he didn't play in the game, they struggled offensively, really couldn't move the football. But watching the game, Oregon State's a lot better than Florida, and hey, Rob Sale is a really good friend of mine. Worked with him a long time. I was working with him with the New York Giants. I knew that he was going to go with Billy to Florida, and I told him, I said, hey, I'm going to tell you, when you talk about team talent, you're going to inherit probably the least talented Florida roster in the last 40 years. So lucky for them, you have the portal, unlimited people that you can sign. So there's an opportunity to flip a roster. And I do think that there's good coaches there that understand that what it takes to win in this league. But I think it also shows how far they are away from actually being able to put a product out there that people that when you associate Florida football, that wasn't it on Saturday, and it hadn't been it most of the year. So they've got a long ways to go.
Yeah, it's been a minute. This is the first time since 1978 and 1979 that Florida's had back-to-back losing seasons, 6 and 7 under Dan Mullen, a little bit of a tailspin. And then this year, really that loss at Vanderbilt, that's the one you just can't excuse. A Florida State rivalry loss, okay. As you said, a well-oiled Oregon State team with an opportunity to win 10 games for, really only the third time in school history. Big opportunity, a team that was really clicking, that beat the Oregon Ducks. You say, all right, you're playing a hot team, but man, losing up there at Vanderbilt, I think that's the regression that you really point to and say, hey, where was your head at? Where was the program at? And you got to wonder a little bit about Billy Napier now. Going into year two, and, I think you went through a little bit of this yourself, that first year taking over a new roster and, maybe the guys that are in the program don't exactly fit your scheme. In fact, I remember wondering that about you. I thought, Butch Jones was a guy that ran a lot of spread stuff, whereas I thought you would be more conventional, a little bit more pro style, a little bit more balanced. And I said, how does Jeremy get his guys in there while at the same time winning with what's left? And I guess I would ask you, just how challenging is that? And what's the next big step now for Billy Napier? You were able to win 8 games in a row at one point at Tennessee. Does Napier have the players to be able to do that? And what is he going to have to do to be able to win 8 games in a row like you did at Tennessee and at some point in his juncture?
Well, I really believe that Billy will have a plan. You got to have some luck involved here too now. But it starts at the quarterback position, and obviously the guy that played for them this past year, he's leaving. They've had issues there with the roster. He's got to find a quarterback. I do think they've got a good running back, and they showed some signs this year that they can run the football. I think if you look at the defensive talent on that roster, it's not what people are used to seeing at the University of Florida. So they need to me, I look at it like this. Who leaves your program? When people leave your program, okay, and Anthony Richardson leaves your program, who do you have to replace him? Is he better than him? Do you have 2 guys to replace him? Because it takes a while for guys to really develop and play at a high level in the SEC. It takes a while for that to happen. So when you have one that can do that and he leaves your program, you better have a couple to replace him, because it'll probably take 2 to replace him. So I always kind of looked at that when you're talking about roster management.
Yeah, there's going to be some challenges ahead for the Florida Gators. Obviously, one more year of the divisional play. I think we go to one division. Looks like 2024. I don't think anything's official yet as far as Texas and Oklahoma joining. I know there's been some scuttlebutt on that. We've talked to the college football playoffs going to expand, but at least one more year left of divisional play. Florida would not seem to look like much of a threat. One of the teams that might have been, Tennessee, a team you left, we're seeing opt-outs. I want to ask you about this because Jalen Hyatt and Cedric Tillman, obviously two very talented guys. And whenever the players get to this stage of the season and they got a lot of people in their ear, they got an NFL career that's pending. I'm sure mom and dad and agents are all talking to them. And you, having been a head coach, NFL guys talk to you. Does it matter to the NFL when players opt out? What's your thoughts on opt out of bowl games for players?
That's really something that's new. It's really kind of come about the last couple of years. It's something that obviously in my time, everybody played, right? But think about how the world has changed in the last 2 years when you talk about COVID. When I was the head coach at Tennessee, we had guys that were put in quarantine for 14 days because they rode on a certain bus. And then on Saturday, they're fixing to play another SEC team. And you're like, hey, you can play today. So the way the world has changed for these guys in the last couple of years, and these guys who obviously are opting out have experienced that, right? So, I'm not judging anybody, right? The bottom line is if you want to play at the highest level, you have an opportunity every Saturday to build your resume, and hey, maybe your resume is so good it can't go anywhere but down. I don't know that. I'm not. I'm really not an expert when it comes to that, but I think it's a decision that some of these guys have to make, and we are seeing opt outs, which I think is frustrating to the fan base, right? So. You think about, just for example, any team, right? We'll say Tennessee, we'll use them as an example. They're going to the Orange Bowl. The Tennessee fans are excited about winning 10 games going to the Orange Bowl. Well, they want to see the guys that helped them get there play in the game, and I'm just using them as an example. But the circumstances are different for each individual player. So, I'm not gonna throw stones at anybody.
Yeah, well, it's difficult because there is some reason why, we saw a couple Florida guys get injured in that Las Vegas Bowl, and you say to yourself, what was really the value of that? But then, like you said, these kids made a commitment to the school, and the fans have been behind them all year, and now they're asking fans for NIL money, and hey, give us money that we can pay the players, but the players may quit on you when you get to the big bowl game. And I think this is one area where the 12-team playoff will help. My experience talking to the Georgia players, and there's been a few that have opted out. A few years ago, DeAndre Baker opted out of playing in the Sugar Bowl. Said he was going to play, then he got down there and didn't play. Didn't want to, risk his first-round stock, but he hung around anyway, which turned out to be a distraction. So Kirby Smart said, okay, we're going to learn a lesson from that. If you're opting out, you ain't traveling with the team. He only wants the guys that are going to play. So that was one lesson Kirby Smart learned from losing to Texas a few years ago. And now, we've seen more guys start to opt out, with their draft stock. And when I talked to the Georgia guys about it, I remember Eric Stokes, he opted out of the Peach Bowl. And Eric told me, if that was a playoff game, I would have played. But it wasn't. And so I'm going to work on my speed. He's, kind of a lightweight corner, doesn't want to get, and I just thought, geez, this is tough. This is a dilemma for these kids. And the message we've sent with these playoffs is that these other bowl games don't matter. And I was talking to Gary Stokin, the executive director of the Peach Bowl. I said, what do you do about this? Because last year they had a non-playoff New Year's Six, and Kenneth Walker sat out from Michigan State and Kenny Pickett from Pitt. He said, we're working with the NCAA. We want to give these guys insurance policies. We want to be able to do something to give them justification to play. Whereas if they were injured, they would be financially compensated. So to me, this is kind of a work in progress. And speaking of a work in progress, Jeremy, early signing day is coming up. I guess I want to get your thoughts on this early signing day. Is this a good thing? Is this model here to stay, having an early signing day in December and the second signing day in February? What is the advantages of this early signing day that we have it now? And what are some of the disadvantages that teams are dealing with?
Well, I like the early signing period. It gave you an opportunity for guys who had made their decision you could get those guys signed on board, and you could kind of start recruiting to the next class in the month of January. Lots of times you probably had 1 or 2 scholarships left. I'm sure now with the portal and everybody being able to transfer, people may possibly leave maybe 2 to 6 spots for guys in the portal. It obviously depends on what kind of shape your program's in, right? But I like the early signing period. It gave an opportunity for young men to get it out of the way. Hey, by the time you get to December, these guys have been, they've been on a ton of trips. They're ready to get started. And you see, I've seen it all over the country. Guys are actually practicing this week with teams in bowl games. So I think it's good for them. So I'm for the early signing period. When you look, once you start the next semester, like I had a young man call me today that played for me. And I'm not exactly for sure on the rules. Like he's wanting to, he transferred from Tennessee. He wants to get in the portal to give himself an opportunity to go to another school. And, I asked him, I said, I don't even know the rules right now. What's the rules? Well, he don't know them either, so the education for these guys and hey, it's changed a lot. The kind of the makeup, the layout of college football in the last, in the last 2 calendar years has really changed, so keeping up the rules is a big deal now.
Will there ever come a time when there's a sign? Could there be someone asked me this, could there be a signing day even earlier? Could you do it before a kid's senior year, or does that just not make sense?
The way I see it, I go back and look in 2020, and on September the 24th, I signed an extension to my contract for 4 years. And on January the 18th, I got fired. So I don't know that makes sense, so I guess from a coaching standpoint, if I was a young man and I signed a letter of intent, I'd want to know who's going to coach me. And I wouldn't want to be hamstrung based off some kind of rule.
Yeah, no doubt. Now, so when Kirby and his staff, I guess you tell me, are they kind of the finishing touches? The day is Wednesday. Are you worried about other guys, contacting your guys? How much pins and needles are there, and how much can you really do to make sure that all these guys that you think are going to sign? What are those signing day surprises like?
Well, I believe at Georgia, they're to the point now that they're choosing. They're choosing who they're going to sign, and there's probably going to be 1 to 2 guys at this point that maybe they don't know for sure, and maybe not. But where that program's at right now, they're having to decide who they want to sign. They've got more guys that want to come to Georgia than they have scholarships to give out. That I don't know that. I've not talked to anybody, but just based off what I see from the program and my experiences being at other programs, I would say that is where Georgia is at today. They're having to decide who to take.
When we're on the outside and we're waiting for the school release that so-and-so's letter is in, and so what's going on inside the building? Are you guys in this one room waiting on all this stuff? Are you working the phones? What happens inside of the war room on signing day in a football building? Whether it was at Alabama or Florida State or Tennessee or Georgia, is it pretty much universally the same everywhere?
Well, I would say probably on Wednesday, like I said, there might be 1, maybe 2 guys that Georgia may not know about, but I'm going to say that as the national letter of intents come in, Kirby and his staff are going to call, congratulate them, talk about the next step. But also that same day, they're going to be recruiting the next class and the next class after that. So in talking about, hey, a year from today, this is where we hope we're at. 2 years from today, this is where we hope we're at. So I see them looking far into the future. I feel like they've got probably a pretty good feeling about this class. Like I said, there might be 1 guy out there. And hey, it's always, as a coach, you always want to flip one right there late, right? Everybody thinks that hey, these are the guys we're going to get. you're always trying to find, let's pick one guy off each SEC school and let's recruit him for the last 20 days that we think can make a difference in our program, and see if we got a chance to flip this guy if we got room for him.
Well, I got to ask, because I'm not sure now. Was Quay Walker, was that a guy that Tennessee had? Because he did the whole hat thing. I mean, when you're that head coach and that moment happens, or do you already have an idea and it's really not much of a shock? Because it does happen. We've seen Georgia flip Pickens. We saw the Quay Walker. Of course, Quay's leading tackler in the NFL, rookies. But was that your first year when that? I'm trying to recall. I think it might have been.
Yeah, so I had a relationship with Quay from Alabama. And, Tennessee wasn't recruiting Quay. Quay was not even considering Tennessee, but because our staff went to Tennessee and took the job, he obviously took a visit up there with the relationships. Things changed at Alabama. It was a Georgia-Alabama deal, right? Well, then once we went to Tennessee, it became a Tennessee-Georgia deal, which we were on the outside looking in, being there from Cordele, Georgia. It's tough to get a kid from there to beat Georgia on them there, right? So, no, but hey, I'm fixing to watch Quay play tonight. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, it's tough. I'll tell you, recruiting it's a tough game, and the coaches invest so much time and effort in building relationships, and it's hard on the kids. They don't want to say no to anybody. As much as anything, they don't want to make that call and say no, because they built that strong relationship. So it's kind of tough all the way around. Last week, Jeremy, we talked about how Georgia would work Saturday backwards. Like next week, it's going to be game week for Georgia. All right, it's going to be a typical game week. Monday will be Monday, Tuesday will be Tuesday. Well, now we're getting into Tuesday and Wednesday the week before. Is this about when Georgia's going to start putting in some Ohio State? And then the other question is, do you worry about the kids losing a little bit when they get that 1 or 2 day break to go home for Christmas?
No, I don't think so. I think, hey, listen, Georgia's to the point, okay, to where they've been in the playoffs. They've won SEC championships. They've dominated the East, okay. Don't think this is an easy thing to do. It's not, okay. They're making it look easy, but it's not easy, okay. And Kirby will be the first to tell you that. So they're not going to, and the players understand that. They're not going to take this for granted, okay. They've worked their tails off to get to this point. Yeah, hey, they're going to enjoy going home. Who doesn't, right? Christmas is a special time, right? You get a chance to be around your family, the people that you love. But when they go back, I'm going to tell you, they're going to go back with a purpose, because it's so hard to get to this point. And you look at Georgia's team, there's a lot of guys that's not been in this situation before. Hey, they might have got on the bus last year and went to Indianapolis, right? But they didn't participate a whole lot once they got there. This is their time. They got an opportunity to put their name on something, to be on Sports Center, all right, to where they put pictures and posters up of them in the Georgia's athletic complex. So they got a chance to put their name on something. So they're not going to not think about it. They're thinking about it probably every moment of the day.
Kirk Herbstreit said this last weekend, Jeremy, and you might have heard it if you were watching the final moments of that Florida game against Oregon State. He said Kirby Smart's better at relating to the players and getting inside their head than any coach in the country. And I thought about that on the one hand, and then I thought about this Darren Lee guy. And you probably don't know who he is, but he was the MVP of the 2014. He was the defensive MVP for Ohio State of the 2014 win over Alabama. And he put up some statistics of Ezekiel Elliott and what he did against Kirby Smart. Said, your coach is being humble for a reason. He kind of called out Kirby. And then there was an article that said that, guys like Darnell Washington and Brock Bowers and Jalen Carter and Jamon Dumas-Johnson were great players. And the guy said, the only name I've ever heard of is Ringo. And I'm thinking to myself, how is this helping Ohio State? So I guess I'll ask you, that sort of bulletin board material, does it matter? Does it resonate? Will that fire guys up to hear some Ohio State former star, calling out their head coach, saying they've never heard of anybody? or is what's the psychology, man? Because you played and you've seen it at Alabama, Florida State, Tennessee, Georgia. Does that stuff resonate?
I don't think so. I really don't, Mike. I think where Georgia's at in the program, I said to this early in the year, I think Georgia's opponent is looking in the mirror at them every day. I believe that. I believe that's what they're preaching. I think they know it, as a team, that if they prepare, they work to execute in practice every week, who they compete against every day on the scout teams when they do good on good. Because I'm going to tell you, unless Kirby's changed, and he may have, but I doubt it, just knowing him, I'm sure on a Tuesday and Wednesday practice, he's probably going to get 12 to 15 plays of good on good for the speed of the game, the physicality of the game, because he's going to preach to his team, nobody practices the way we practice. Nobody prepares the way we prepare. I believe that's what they're preaching. I believe the kids believe it. So I don't think they're worried about what somebody else says. That has no effect on the game. How they go play, how they execute, how they prepare. I think they understand that's what matters when it comes to this game.
I'll tell you what, there's a lot of build up to the game. A lot of Georgia fans are getting excited. Georgia with an opportunity to win back-to-back titles. Hasn't happened since you were a part of that Alabama staff in 08, 09, I guess, when the Tide did it. Pretty remarkable time for Saban. Nobody's done it during the college football playoff era. So Kirby Smart and the Bulldogs looking to make history. Jeremy, really appreciate you joining us. Next Monday night, I'm going to be coming live from the downtown hotel, the media hotel. We'll be on site for the Peach Bowl. It's hard to believe this game is less than 2 weeks away, I guess. And for you, you're talking about watching some Monday Night Football. How much football have you been soaking in? Because in the past, you've been coaching, focusing on just one team, whether it was the Giants or the Tide or Tennessee or Florida State. I mean, what's this been like for you to soak all this football in, man?
Well, for the first time, I think ever, I've been putting Christmas toys together. My wife's I've really had appreciation of what a coach's wife actually does. I mean, I got frustrated for the last 4 or 5 hours. I nearly missed our podcast tonight, Mike, because I lost track of time. I'm sitting here with screwdrivers, but hey, I've really enjoyed it. I get a chance to watch guys that I had a chance to coach with over the years, see them have a chance to play in bowl games, and watch guys that I've coached against, play professional ball. But so I'm really enjoying it. And I just want to take this time, Mike, to wish you and everybody else and that's associated with Dog Nation a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year's. And I hope everybody has a blessed Christmas.
We appreciate it, Coach. Thanks again for joining us. That's going to do it for tonight. Thanks for joining us on the Ingles on the Beach show. I want to thank my producer, Michael Carvel, our first half guest, Cole Cubelic. Hope you guys enjoyed it tonight. Don't forget, Wednesday, Centel's Intel, every day, 10 a.m., Dog Nation Daily with Brandon Adams. Have a great week, everybody.